The morning I discovered that the HOA had drained my lake over a flood risk claim was the morning I realized just how far Karen and her team were willing to go in their campaign of absurdity. I had been asleep in the main ranch house when an alert pinged on my phone. Water sensors on the lake indicated a sudden drop in water levels. Rushing outside, I saw the shocking sight. Half of my lakebed exposed, mud cracking beneath the bright sunlight, and the culprits clearly at work. Brent, Karen, Donut, and a gaggle of HOA volunteers, standing waist-deep in mud with pumps, hoses, and an air of total confidence. According to them, they had community approval to drain the lake, citing some environmental assessment they claimed to have commissioned, which, of course, was forged and entirely fabricated. The audacity of thinking they could touch federally leased land, which supplied local fire departments and wildlife habitats, was staggering. I calmly took a deep breath, knowing that panic would be useless and that precision was far more effective than anger. I immediately activated the first countermeasure, remote-controlled lake gates and water rerouting systems I had installed for irrigation and flood control. Within minutes, the drained water began returning to the lakebed, reversing their efforts in a controlled, strategic manner. Brent and Donut looked confused as their hoses sputtered and pumps coughed, while Karen screamed instructions that made no sense as mud began to suck their boots into the earth like quicksand. My daughter, stationed in the observation tower with binoculars and a tablet controlling secondary systems, activated motion-triggered alarms along the lake perimeter, producing deafening sirens that echoed across the property. Local wildlife, sensing the chaos, scattered, and the sound alone caused Brent and Donut to stagger in panic, tripping over hoses and into shallow puddles of their own making. Karen, realizing things were slipping out of her control, attempted to retreat but got stuck in a muddy trench while Donut attempted a heroic rescue, only to collapse himself. I approached the edge of the lake calmly, hands in pockets, surveying the scene. Do you really think you can control land that you don't own, touch water you have no legal rights to, and manipulate natural resources that are federally protected? I asked, voice calm and commanding. Brent opened his mouth, but no words could emerge over the sirens and the splashing mud. I pressed another button on my tablet, activating automated sprinklers from the dock, soaking everyone further and making it nearly impossible for them to gain traction. Meanwhile, my son, ever vigilant at his dispatcher console, had already notified local law enforcement. Within minutes, multiple sheriff units arrived, witnessing a spectacle that would have been comical if it weren't so humiliating. Brent flailing in mud, Donut helplessly slipping in puddles, Karen screaming and clinging to her phone for dear life, all while trying to justify their actions. The sheriff officers, assessing the situation, immediately issued citations for trespassing, destruction of private property, and illegal interference with federally leased land. Karen shrieked, claiming bias and harassment, but all evidence had already been logged by cameras, drones, and my daughter's tablet system. I then activated the final phase of my defensive strategy. Floodgates sealed temporarily, ensuring no further tampering could occur, while automated locking mechanisms secured the docks and lake access points. By the time the chaos had settled, the HOA volunteers were drenched, covered in mud, utterly humiliated, and escorted off the property by law enforcement. My family, safe and unharmed, watched from the porch as the lake slowly returned to its natural levels, wildlife gradually returning, and the sun reflected across the water with serene brilliance. Karen's hubris had been crushed, Brent's ego shattered, and Donut's incompetence immortalized in local gossip. I finally exhaled, recognizing a truth that had become painfully obvious over years of HOA conflicts. Attempting to control my property, interfere with resources, or challenge my authority would result in complete, calculated humiliation, regardless of their audacity or numbers. Titan, my loyal canine, stood by the edge of the lake, tail wagging slightly but posture alert, a reminder that my defenses were both intelligent and lethal in their precision. My daughter laughed quietly from the porch, noting how Karen's mud-splattered phone had cracked under the stress, destroying any evidence she thought she had collected. I sipped my coffee, savoring the quiet that had returned, fully aware that this calm was only temporary. Brentshire, Karen, Brent, and Donut would scheme again, But no matter the strategy, they would always be outmatched, outsmarted, and outmaneuvered, with every failed attempt recorded for posterity. The lake was safe, my property was secure, and our family's sovereignty over the land was absolute. A lesson the HOA would remember for years, assuming they had any memory left after yet another spectacular failure.